Good evening. The show is The Smoking Section. My name is Stephen Helfer, and I am one of the co-founders of Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights. And we try to act locally and think globally. So we have been fairly active right here in our fair city of Cambridge. And last Saturday, we filmed a video regarding the new pilot program that the City of Cambridge has initiated through the kind offices of Councillor Mark McGovern to start putting up these small cigarette receptacles on no parking sign posts and lamp posts and traffic signal posts and whatnot, to make it more convenient for us smokers to dispose of our cigarette butts rather than dropping them on the street. Of course, one of the side effects of exiling smokers from bars and restaurants, which are really private establishments, but we like to call them public establishments so that they can effect smoking bans and whatnot. But one of the side effects is that smokers really have no convenient place like an ashtray to discard their butts, so they accumulate on the street, on the sidewalks, and engender a certain amount of displeasure on the part of lots of people as to litter and whatnot. And of course, anti-smoking campaigners are very happy to see lots of cigarette butts on the street because they can then use them to further vilify smokers, accusing them of being litterers. And so these receptacles are made in Maine, and the city of Salem has been very active in using them and has had some success. And of course, this really depends a lot on word of mouth and on smokers using them and cooperation from several different departments of the city. And our good friends Christina Kerr and Johnny Baroche, who has a program here on CCTV, are excellent. Well, Johnny in particular is an actor, very good on the in the video, and Christina is a very good producer. She does work for Neighborhood Media, I think is the CCTV program whereby local people make videos regarding different things going on in the city of Cambridge. So we're going to try to publicize that a lot, and perhaps particularly here in Central Square, go to smokers themselves and bring these sidewalk butlers to their attention, and hopefully get people to use them and see what happens. But one way or another, I think our efforts will be worthwhile. Hopefully we'll be successful, but of course there are no guarantees of that, and that's okay too. I got an answer back from the Middlesex District Attorney's Office because I had taken issue with the announcement that the Berkshire Street fire last, I think it was December 3rd, which burnt down, I think, 11 buildings here in Cambridge, was caused by the careless disposal of smoking materials. Now, the careless disposal of smoking materials is often blamed on, is often used when the real cause of a fire is difficult, if not impossible, to determine. And this is something that I have documented in fire investigative textbooks and even quotes by fire investigators themselves, that there is a tendency on the part of fire investigators that if the cause of a fire seems to be particularly hard to pinpoint, they can always blame it on the careless disposal of smoking materials, And there's no one other than Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights to say, hey, wait a second, do you really have evidence to that effect? And I have reached out to the Cambridge Fire Department and to the State Fire Marshal's office, and neither of them has been willing to give me such evidence. That is their official report, and they have taken an exemption in the State Freedom of Information Act, which says that if something is under investigation, actively under investigation, they do not need to release this to a citizen. So in January of this year of 2017, I believe both the Cambridge Fire Department and the State Fire Marshal's office said that the fire was caused by smoking, but I have not been able to get them to proffer any evidence. And in fact, the Cambridge Fire Department has told me that they reopened their investigation. But of course, reopening the investigation is not news, whereas the Globe and the Chronicle, even other media sources, announced to the public that smokers had caused the fire. So until we see that evidence, we are going to be very skeptical that there is such evidence. And we live in this age where official organizations, governmental organizations, are supposedly so transparent, but at least when it comes to smoking and eliminating smoking and discriminating against smokers and vilifying smokers and vilifying tobacco companies, it seems anything goes. And that kind of brings me to a big article that came out in the Washington Post, one of the nation's leading newspapers, talking about how even though higher income people's smoking rates have declined, poor people's smoking rates haven't declined in the last 30 or 40 years to the same extent. And therefore, anti-smoking campaigners are saying, of course, that they need lots of more funding and they need to put more restrictions and put higher taxes and all of these sort of things, like we're going to tax people for their own good, we're going to restrict their behavior, we're going to stigmatize them, and all of these things are to help poor people quit smoking. And if, in the mix, if, an elderly person freezes to death because he or she went out on a balcony to smoke a cigarette in an old age home and freezes to death, we say, well, that's okay. We have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Or if you tax people who so highly for their cigarettes that they can't afford to get proper nutrition or to get medical attention when necessary, well, you say that's just okay because, again, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Of course, all of this really is done supposedly in the name of public health, but the first rule of medicine, according to the father of medicine, is first do no harm. So you do not hurt people to help people, even if you say you're doing it to improve their health. And then, of course, in this article, they quote, it's a very, very biased article. Like my friend Paul Neff says, the news media is really unkind to not only to the tobacco companies, but to smokers. And for example, they claim that cigarette companies tailor their advertising to attract poor people to continue smoking. Well, I mean, one reason that is so patently false, is so obviously false, is that cigarette companies don't advertise on television, don't advertise on the radio, don't advertise in most newspapers. Like the New York Times will take no tobacco advertising, which is a form of censorship, by the way, that the New York Times engages in. And so if the tobacco companies are really targeting poor people with their advertising, where are they doing it? They are so restricted in areas where they can advertise that this claim made by unscrupulous anti-smoking campaigners, which is widely publicized by the Washington Post, is really very it's very easy to see that it's got no merit. And then again, the idea of you take people who are already having a difficult time economically and increase their taxes on cigarettes and restrict areas where they can smoke, so that the only place they can smoke is in their own home, if in their own home, and inflict that kind of discomfort on these people for their own good. I mean, I think someone has to step back and ask, is this ethical public policy? Again, to inflict discomfort and inconvenience on people consciously by the government, state and federal governments, is to me a very unethical public policy. And I am really disappointed that groups like the ACLU or that the general population as a whole doesn't doesn't weigh in more on this, allow their fellow citizens to be taxed, to be restricted, and so forth and so on. Well, tonight I think I'm going to go to a smoker of the week, which we haven't had on the show for a while, and let's see if I can find my material. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Here we are. This is Roald Amundsen, who was the first man to reach the South Pole, and which he did in 1911, December 4th, 1911. And he was an inveterate pipe smoker. In fact, he, I know at least once, actually purchased 50 pounds of tobacco for his own smoking pleasure. And the first thing he did when he got to the South Pole was, in fact, smoke a pipeful of tobacco, a celebratory pipeful of tobacco. And it's interesting because I have done a lot of reading of polar exploration, and it seems like one of the things that allowed men to endure the kind of cold and hardship and lack of food and lack of diversions in their long, sometimes their 2 and 3 year expeditions to the North and South Pole was tobacco. So, for example, when Ernest Shackleton had to abandon ship in the South Pole, and his men were told that they could take only the very, very barest necessities, one of those necessities that he had his men take was a pound of tobacco for each man. And the tobacco, by reducing their appetite, allowed them to subsist for long periods of time with very little food. It enabled them to get along with each other better, endure boredom, and again, almost all polar explorers at that time in the early 20th century were very, very avid tobacco enthusiasts. And so Raoul Amundsen, again, the first man to reach the South Pole in December 1911, first thing he did was have a celebratory pipeful of tobacco. Now, on our Facebook page today, it seems that in a lot of countries that are predominantly Muslim, during the period of Ramadan, they crack down on not only people drinking, but people smoking. And I have spoken to knowledgeable Muslims, and at the time the Quran was written, I don't think there was tobacco in Arab countries, and therefore there is no mention of tobacco in the Quran, although there is mention of alcohol and its prohibition. So again, it might be worthwhile noting that this prohibition against smoking during Ramadan or other Muslim holidays or in Muslim countries is a recent invention. And this is something that I'm glad to see that even some anti-smoking advocates regard as a real curtailment of people's liberties in these countries. And I hope that we see less of it, and I hope we see more of people. I hope we see more of people fighting these bans. Let's see. I may have a call here. Let's see. You're on the smoking section. Hello, you're on the smoking section. Hi.
It's Jim.
Hey, Jim, I haven't heard from you in a long time.
Yeah, how you been?
I've been just fine, thank you. And you?
I noticed those butt containers all around Central Square at the bus stops and stuff.
Well, I'm glad you noticed them.
Yeah.
Have you seen anybody using them?
Huh?
Have you seen anybody using them?
I haven't actually seen anybody, but I think there are less butts around that area where the dispensers are.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, it is good. Yeah. I don't like to see that stuff, and I don't think smokers really like to see that either. Like you.
No, I don't.
Smoke is a bad thing.
That's right.
Literally.
I think I ran into you at the corner of Magazine Street and Franklin Street.
Yeah, in Central Square, and I ran into you at Cambridge Hospital too.
Oh, geez, yes, I remember. But how was your friend?
And, you say you buy dinner there sometimes.
Well, I go there for lunch often.
Yeah, so instead of blowing your money at Cambridge Hospital,
yeah.
I mean, they don't deserve the business anyways. If I see you in there eating, I'll take you out for lunch if I got money. Get the hell out of Cambridge Hospital. I don't need the money.
I think the food is pretty good there.
Yeah, well, I could buy you a better lunch. If I got money, I'll buy you a better lunch than Cambridge Hospital.
Well, now, how are you doing? You're not smoking your pipe anymore.
No, I smoke my pipe once in a while. And I have a cigar once in a while. I get it in Levitt, and I get the Kentucky Cheroots. They're the same cigars that Clint Eastwood smoked in his movies.
Is that right?
But that isn't why I bought it. I bought them in the beginning just because they had a strong kick to it, rather than regular cigars. You should try it sometime. The Kentucky Cheroots.
What do they get for them?
They're $2.50 a piece.
That's pretty cheap.
Yeah, but they're very long cigars.
Really?
So you get 3 of them, you cut them in half, and you got 6. So that 6 will last me maybe 2 days.
Okay.
Yeah, once in a while I still do, Steve. Sometimes I quit. you know, and sometimes I go back to it. And it helps my weed last a little bit longer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I smoke the pipe in between smoking weed, and it helps it last a little bit longer too.
Right, right.
Like you say, it's a social thing too, you know. I have a friend over, we smoke a couple joints, he smokes his cigarettes, I smoke my pipe, and take a break, then go back to smoking weed, have a pipe. It goes together.
Does it really?
You know?
Well, you know, so do you find tobacco and weed both sociable things?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
do you notice any kind of ill health effects from your smoking of tobacco?
A bit of a cough.
A little bit.
And my tongue gets a little numb. You know. Yeah. I mean, it's. I still think, Steve, that it's not a good thing.
Right. Right.
You know. I mean. I don't feel there's any health benefit to it. Health.
Well, let me just ask you.
Psychological relaxation is good, but for the physical being, it's not good, Steve.
But you know, we live in a society right now where there is so much anxiety and tension and many people depressed, and instead of smoking tobacco, more and more people are taking psychoactive medications. And do you think it's just possible that because we cannot smoke freely, that even some people are being pushed to do much worse things, like perhaps get involved with opioids and stuff? Do you think if people could more smoke?
Oh, no. I mean, addiction to drugs has nothing to do with not being able to smoke a cigarette, Steve.
Well, I mean, if you could reduce your anxiety with tobacco, you might be less inclined to try more powerful, worse things. Would you not agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that, because when I was a kid, I started smoking weed, and it did bring on other drugs. It's not that marijuana.
But I'm talking about tobacco. I'm talking about tobacco.
It introduces you to people who do other things like that.
Well, but tobacco doesn't, because you buy tobacco at legal places like a, pharmacy or a, or a convenience store, so you don't get introduced to illegalities. But when you can't smoke, you get pushed to, go to opioids or psychoactive medications, I think.
No, weed helps with psychiatric medicine, Steve. You know? Like, I don't have to take Valium as often. I'm going to probably come off of the Valium eventually, because the weed takes the place of it. And that gives me more joy than taking a pill.
But you don't get depressed from smoking marijuana?
Do I what?
Get depressed when you smoke marijuana?
No, quite the opposite.
Some people do.
The opposite. I get a good appetite. My appetite's not that good. But when I smoke weed, I got a good appetite. I don't eat junk food like, people say, oh, you get the munchies and you eat candy.
Yes, right.
No. I like to have a good steak dinner with a baked potato and a vegetable,
And so what do you think, so you think the smoking butlers can make a difference, the sidewalk butlers can make a difference here in Cambridge?
Yes, I think so. I hope so. I mean, you gotta be an asshole not to put your butt in one of those things if they're right in front of you.
If they're convenient, and that's important, because some of them, Jim, are not placed as convenient as we would like to see them placed.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have a meeting with the Department of Public Works and with Mark McGovern, because we got some ideas how we could place them a little bit more conveniently. But Jim, thank you for calling, and do me a favor, next time you see me, take me out to lunch, I'd love that, and tell your friends about the sidewalk butlers, okay?
I'll point them out if I see them smoking. I'll point one out. Not being rude, I'll just say that those dispensers are there for a reason.
And tell them they're put there by Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights and the city of Cambridge.
Well, if I see someone I know,
Yeah,
I will point it out, Steve.
really. Okay, well,
Yeah.
Jim, thank you for calling.
All right, I'll see you.
Thank you. Well, it's nice that Jim is still watching the show, and I'm glad to hear that he's enjoying his cheroots, Kentucky cheroots. I think I'll have to try them because the cigars that I've been smoking from Levitt and Pierce are a little bit more expensive than that. They're about $4.50 each, but I find a cigar will last me an hour, and when I smoke a cigar, I feel so centered and in control of my emotions and even my physical body. I can sit there and be emotionless, but have my mind working very clearly and be more in control of my impulses. Like I will be able to listen to things that I might disagree with and just let them kind of pass away and not have to react to them, which of course is something I think all our politicians should be required to do, which is smoke cigars. Thanks for watching the smoking section. See you next week.